I'm 63, so it's over decades, but my background was complex post-traumatic stress, and I lived with that for decades before there was a term. I basically managed to heal that through Ayurveda, and Ayurveda reset my nervous system as well, the healing approach, just a 3-month healing approach. That term actually, non-sleep deep rest, NSDR, was coined by a neurobiologist called Andrew Huberman, and he came up with that term because he was looking at Yoga Nidra, which comes from the same tradition as Ayurveda, over 5,000 years old, and it's a technique that Ayurveda has used. If you don't do that, if you don't understand how to support the body's homeostasis, need for homeostasis, then you're going to get ill further along the way, and you're not going to be able to have peak performance anymore. And that does happen to athletes. They get burnt out. And it happens a lot in the corporate world as well, where people push. Maybe for decades they've been able to get away with it because they have a very strong British constitution, huge ambition. But there will come a point where they either get burnt out, or they become depressed, or they have a breakdown, suicidal ideation, and all the statistics show that that's what's happening. Coming over here on the train, I was thinking about the world and all the big things going in the world, and how people can feel disempowered.
Hi everyone, welcome to Beat Brains. Today we are here with Lucy FLEETWOod. Hi Lucy, how are you? How are you going on?
I'm well, thank you so much, Sukita, for inviting me. It's lovely to be here.
What is really the back to balance, and how people really think about it in their lives? So can you explain me that?
Yeah, absolutely. So back to balance, I mean, it's a marketing term in a sense, back to balance. And it's just the work that I do. I weave together Ayurveda, non-sleep deep rest, and a solution-focused approach to coaching and to non-sleep deep rest. And we live in a culture where we're constantly pushed out of balance by everything. It's making us ill. Mm. And so I help people to come back into balance so that they can be well. That's in a nutshell. Yeah, more to it than that, but it's an interesting question though, back to balance, because it doesn't mean that you're always in a state of balance. So I'm not doing work which is helping people to be always in a state of balance, because we live in a world that's going to knock us off balance, because we're human beings and we've got all sorts of pressures in our lives. And also because sometimes we want to push out from balance to get peak performance. Whether you're an athlete or working in a job and you want to be really good at what you do, you push out from that state of balance. The point is you need to come back into balance. If you keep pushing out, you get burnt out. So that's the work I do. I help people to understand how to come back into balance.
Was there any point in your journey where you realized your personal struggles could actually become your strength in helping others?
Yeah, absolutely.
I do?
I mean, I'm 63, so it's over decades, but my background was complex post-traumatic stress, and I lived with that for decades before there was a term for it even. You have to be very resilient to do that, and you learn a lot about stress. You learn a lot about your own trauma through that journey. I've learnt a lot. And it was actually only 10 years ago that I found a complete cure for it, so that I never get triggered into trauma anymore. That's been the case for 10 years. When you have post-traumatic stress and it goes on for a long time, it has an effect, obviously. It's chronic stress and trauma, as it has an effect on your physicality. And for me, I could always get up and keep marching and keep smiling, carry on with my life, but it affected my body. And so it affected my digestion. And then when digestion is impacted over a long period of time, that affects your immune system, affects everything, and you start getting all sorts of different things. So over a sort of 15-year period, that went on, and I basically managed to heal that through Ayurveda. And Ayurveda reset my nervous system as well, the healing approach, just a 3-month healing approach. And then at the end of that, I met somebody, they did solution-focused hypnotherapy, which included a particular technique called rewind. And they were able to rewind the traumas, even though they were complex, within 12 weeks, sorted. And so I went on to train in those things to help other people. So that's the way that my experience of life has helped me to bring myself to the work that I do.
That's good. That's good. For someone who has never heard of NSDR, non-sleep deep rest.
Yeah.
So how would you explain it in a simple terms?
You can explain it really simply. That term actually, non-sleep deep rest, NSDR, was coined by a neurobiologist called Andrew Huberman, who many people know about.
Yeah, I heard about it.
And he came up with that term because he was looking at Yoga Nidra, which comes from the same tradition as Ayurveda, over 5,000 years old. And it's a technique that Ayurveda has used.
It's from the ancient times, like.
Yeah, it is. But because it was packaged in Ayurveda, Andrew Huberman wanted to take it out of that in case it put people off, basically. And it's the same with hypnotherapy. Hypnotherapy takes you into the same state. So Yoga Nidra and the hypnotherapy trance state are very similar. And they change the brainwave, so they can take us from a stressed state, brainwave state, to very calm, very meditative, very peaceful, theta alpha, and it allows us to also access the subconscious mind. So Yoga Nidra, which is NSDR, Ayurveda uses that to take the person into a brain state that allows them to heal themselves and to regulate the nervous system. And it's a fantastic stress management tool, if you like.
So every night, everyone are going to the unconscious or like paralysis. So, I mean, to the sleep.
When they go to sleep?
Yeah, to the sleep. And how does it work actually?
Why do we go to sleep?
Yeah, why do we go to sleep?
What's the science of going to sleep? Do you know, I can't actually explain that to you. I don't know the whole science of going to sleep.
It's fine.
But we do, the brainwave changes. So when I was training in solution focused hypnotherapy, on our first weekend, I remember one of us had to get up and put the electrode hat on.
Yeah.
And they were wired up to a computer, and we could see their brainwaves on the wall, and they read a script with a certain sort of little spaces in it, which is what you do when you read a hypnotherapy script. And we watched their brainwave change from beta down to theta.
Okay.
And so that's what's happening when you go to sleep. Your brainwave is changing until you're in deep sleep. And when you're in REM sleep, it's fascinating because when you're in REM sleep, that's when you're dreaming. And it could be metaphorical, it could be a clear dream. And it's the brain's way of processing the stresses of the day. And it's about, I can't remember exactly, it's 20-something% of the sleep rhythm, which means that we don't always get through all the stress of the day. We don't process it all. And that's what the big problem is now in the world. 24/7 news, things going on in the world on another part of the continent that you can't do anything about. People are so stressed, and their REM sleep isn't able to process all of the stresses they're taking in day after day after day. So coming back to NSDR, if they have routine every day where they're doing this for themselves, it really, really helps with that.
Can you explain me how to combine Ayurveda and NSDR in a single approach? How do you coach this?
How do I bring the three things together?
How do you combine this both,
Yeah.
like Ayurveda and NSDR?
It does vary on who I'm with. So when I meet with somebody, I need to meet people where they are. So some people, they may be in quite a good mental state, and they really want that Ayurvedic plan. They want to understand what food to eat for their particular constitution, what exercise to do, all the different lifestyle protocols to keep themselves in a good, balanced state. But most of the people that I see actually are managing huge stress levels. So if I was to give them an Ayurvedic plan straight away, they're not going to do it. They're too stressed. So then I work with NSDR, and I'll work with a solution-focused approach to bring their stress levels down. And I can also use it to help them create the new habits that they're going to need to create in order to carry out the Ayurvedic plan. So I weave the things together, but it's very different depending on who I'm working with and what they need. So for some people, I might give them an Ayurvedic plan, and then we might do some work every week creating the habit patterns for them that will help them do it quickly. For other people, it's just drip feeding little parts of that plan within weekly sessions of NSDR and solution-focused work.
Can you share your success story that mood you do here right now?
For me, the success story is that I'm completely healed. I have no PTSD attacks anymore. So I had decades where every few weeks I would have a trauma attack, and nobody would have known. I just get up and I go out and I smile, but inside it takes such a toll. And anybody out there who's listening to this who has PTSD, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. To be free of that is the biggest success of my life. And if it didn't take long, 12 weeks. And if I'd known that, if that happened in my 20s, in my 30s instead of my 50s, wow, yeah, that is the biggest success for me. And in terms of other people and the work that I do, my biggest success is every single person that sits in front of me that's healed.
Is there any myth about the trauma in recovery or healing
Yeah.
that you wish more people understand correctly, in a perfection way, in a correct way?
Yeah.
So many people think that what they are thinking is in a perfect way of healing, but it's not the correct way of healing. So they actually need to know what's the really healing is.
Yeah.
Yeah, from the trauma or from the burnout or from the stress.
Yeah.
How do you define it, like, and how do you redefine it to the people?
The thing is, it's very complex because we're all, as human beings, we bring different things, don't we? So you could have 10 people who have trauma or have PTSD, and each one of those might actually be healed slightly differently. So the first myth is that you can't be healed of PTSD because I've experienced that change. I've experienced that healing. I have not had a trauma attack for 10 years. They used to be every few weeks, so I know that that's completely healed. And for me, that process of the combination of Ayurveda and solution-focused hypnotherapy with the rewind technique is what healed me. But other people might be healed in other ways. And we always want that certainty in the world, don't we? This is what you do. This is the truth. And life isn't like that, really. It really isn't. And it's the same with the brain, how the brain works. You know, when I was trained in solution-focused hypnotherapy, I was taught about a certain model of neuroscience and was thinking at the time about the model of the brain. Well, that's all changed. That's all moved on over time. Yet the process still works. And so, for me, the myth is around thinking that there's one single truth for everybody and that you can't be healed if you've got PTSD. And then the third thing is, I spent a lot of decades, having different types of counselling. So psychotherapy, different types of approaches. And actually in my experience, I'm not going to say anything is right or wrong, because I can only talk from my own experience. But in my experience, if you take somebody back into the trauma and get them to talk about it in order to help them understand how to manage what that does to them, you're not healing them. You're keeping them trapped. That was my experience. So something like CBT, it's great at helping you to manage trauma attack, but for me, it didn't cure it. What cured it was working with the brain. Because what happens is trauma gets stored in the wrong part of the brain. It gets stuck, it's to do with the amygdala, it gets stuck in the amygdala process. And what the hypnotherapy and the rewind technique do is that they allow that processing to take place so that it then gets moved to a different part of the brain. So it's not being triggered anymore. And so I think that's quite important, because actually what happens with mainstream approaches to healing is that they have to be researched over decades before they become mainstream. So at the moment, CBT is the thing that people will be sent for, and they'll have to talk about their trauma to a certain extent at least. But then they'll be helped to manage what that effect that has on them, which is great, learning to manage it. It's really useful. But right now, the mainstream wouldn't say, yes, let's send this person to have solution-focused therapy with the rewind technique, because there hasn't been enough research gathered. It's about 20 years worth so far, I think. I think they need another 10. I don't know. But it's a long time before it gets accepted. And so where I trained, they work with the University of West of England, and they're collecting all that data. So at some point, there it will be offered in mainstream. So I just want to say to anybody who's out there, give it a go. Even if your doctor isn't sending you there, because it completely cured it for me.
Why can't we sleep at night?
There's different ways I can answer that. So obviously when stress levels are high, that can affect people's sleep. From an Ayurvedic perspective, we talk about different constitutional types, and there's one particular constitutional type. If it goes out of balance, it's called Vata. So if the Vata constitution or the Vata dosha within someone's constitution moves out of balance, one of the symptoms of that is waking between sort of 2 and 4 in the morning and not being able to get back to sleep again, having a racing brain. If somebody is very pitta type of person, or they have the pitta dosha out of balance, they can find it very hard to fall asleep at night. So that's, from an Ayurvedic perspective, just a very small insight there. And then we live out of balance with our rhythms, with our natural rhythms of our body. And so circadian rhythm. So from a Western point of view, we talk about the circadian rhythms. So you need to be able to live in rhythm with those. Otherwise, it puts your internal rhythms out, and that can become something that stops you from sleeping well at night. So I had somebody the other day who was struggling with their sleep. And they're sort of really not sleeping through the night, brain racing, and then tired in the day. And so the first thing I would suggest is start getting up with the sun and be asleep by 10 o'clock, because that starts to rebalance the circadian rhythm. The reason for that is that as soon as the sun starts rising and the light starts coming up, it triggers all the different hormones and different chemicals that are needed for you to move through your day. You know, your cortisol gets going. When the sun goes down, melatonin gets going. That helps you to sleep well at night. But you need to be in that rhythm to do that. From an Ayurvedic perspective, they also talk about rhythms and biological rhythms. They talk about the doshas that make up the constitution. And they have what they call a dosha clock. They're talking about the same thing, really, with a different language. And they explain that we have 2 sort of 4-hour slots in the day when the body's metabolizing. And one is between 10 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. And that's when we want to eat our main meal, lunchtime, because we're going to metabolize it really well. That's going to help our digestion. And then the next 4 hours is 10 o'clock in the evening to 2 o'clock in the morning. And that metabolism is for the body to metabolize all the experiences of the day and to tidy itself up and to come back into homeostasis. And if we don't go to sleep at that, so that can happen, we're awake, that we'll use that energy in a different way. So if you stay up past 10 o'clock, you're going to feel hungry, you're going to get the munchies, and your mind's going to start wanting to do something. And so you're using that energy for eating, for digestion, for thinking, for doing things, instead of allowing your body to use it to reset itself. So if you were studying and you were staying up till 2 in the morning studying, really focused on something, you're not getting that opportunity to use that. Your body's not able to use it to metabolize, come back to homeostasis. And over time, it's going to affect your sleeping. It's also can affect health and stress levels. That's where the mind starts to race. It pushes the doshas out from an Ayurvedic perspective. If you're a very pitta person, it pushes pitta out, then you're going to have drive, you're going to have ambition, but you're going to be burning yourself out. And that's where the burnout comes in, where we just keep pushing and pushing. So that one thing of getting up with the sun and being asleep by 10 allows you to reset your circadian rhythms, which is really helpful for sleep.
Actually, why do we sleep? Not just biologically, but from a deeper perspective, what is sleep really doing for our body, mind, and for our emotional balance?
From my perspective, and it's a very small perspective really, just from the work that I do, sleep allows us to come back into balance. It's all about coming back into homeostasis. And that is needed physically, emotionally, and mentally. If we don't come back into balance physically, then from an Ayurvedic perspective, our dosha balance is going to go out of balance. That's going to impact everything. It's going to impact digestion, and that's going to impact, because it's a system, that's going to impact our immune function. It's going to impact our gut-brain microbiomes, the relationship between the gut and brain. So none of them are separated. Yeah. So I look at it in a very simple way. I'm not an academic. I just know that sleep allows the body to do, because the body's so intelligent. I don't know if anybody realises that. The body knows how to be well. It's constantly regenerating, as long as we support it to do what it knows how to do. But when we live out of balance with our biological rhythms, we live out of balance with the circadian rhythms, we're not supporting our body to do what it needs to do. And that's when things start going wrong. So sleep is just one of the things that the body needs, so that we're not using the energy all the time to be doing something in the world. That energy can turn it inwards, and the body and the mind can use it to return to balance. And that's needed physically, emotionally, and mentally, and they're all connected.
I've said before, what is Yoga Nidra?
So Yoga Nidra is a state of mind. It's a state of mind. So it's a process you go through. So in Ayurveda, if I'm working with somebody with Yoga Nidra, I'll talk them through deep relaxation, each part of their body. And as each part of their body becomes deeply, deeply relaxed, it's as if their body's in deep sleep, but their mind is awake and aware. And so the mind can then be utilised when the body's in this deep sleep state, but the mind is awake and aware. You can then use your mind to heal the body, to work with the body to heal itself. So if there's something specific, or to work with subconscious patterns. So somebody wants to, an athlete, peak performance, they can work with their subconscious patterns to enable them to be able to be really good at what they do, for it to be a subconscious response almost. Yeah, that's when they're going to be in flow. Yeah. Because they practiced it and they've got everything in their subconscious that allows them to then be in flow.
What is really getting back to the balance?
What does it mean? Yeah. In our culture, we're stressed all the time, aren't we? We're living out of balance. We're living out of balance. I mean, if you look at the statistics on mental health, they're absolutely skyrocketing. And it's because we're living out of balance. It's because we push ourselves so hard. It's because we don't know how to come back into balance when we push out. So, if you're an athlete and you push out, but you know how to come back to balance, that's fine. You can keep pushing out, come back to balance. Push out, peak performance, come back to balance. If you don't do that, if you don't understand how to support the body's homeostasis, need for homeostasis, then you're going to get ill further along the way. And you're not going to be able to have peak performance anymore. And that does happen to athletes. They get burnt out. And it happens a lot in the corporate world as well, where people push to push to push to push. Maybe for decades they've been able to get away with it because they have a very strong British constitution, huge ambition. But there will come a point where they either get burnt out or they become depressed, they break down, suicidal ideation, and all the statistics show that that's what's happening. So that's why back to balance is so important. We've got to support the body's need to return to homeostasis if we want to push out and achieve amazing things, and if we want to manage our stress levels. Yeah, and in our culture, in this Western culture, gosh, it's pushing everybody out of balance. Where so much suicide. It's so sad, and particularly for the younger generations. Generation Z is the millennial generation. The mental health condition, the anxiety, the depression has skyrocketed. It's really skyrocketed for these generations. And it doesn't need to be like that. They just need to understand how to balance. And the other thing is that because mental health issues have got higher, because we analyse everything, we research everything, and of course it's really important to do that, and we label everything. People think there's something wrong with them. They have a this disorder or a that disorder. And I really want to say for most people, there is nothing wrong with them. They just need to learn how to come back to balance. It's perfectly natural to be anxious, to be suicidal, to be depressed when the stress levels have been going on chronically for too long. And it's because we haven't come back into balance. So that's why a few protocols, and not sleeping, you're talking about not sleeping, that's a sign. That's a sign that we need to come back into balance. There are lots of sort of symptoms, and for the different constitutional types, Vata, Pitta, Kapha. So Vata types, when that person is slipping out of balance, they'll have particular symptoms that will show up. So in Ayurveda, it's really fascinating. There's 5 stages to disease, and symptoms will be showing up all the way along. And it's only when you get to stage 5 and 6 that the Western medical system will be able to say, you've got this, you've got cancer, you've got depression, they label it, you've got whatever it is. But there are all those symptoms at stages 1, 2, 3 and 4, where if you take a notice of them and applied the remedy, you wouldn't have got to stage 5 and 6. So the body is amazing at healing itself. So for Vata types, they're going to start feeling a little bit anxious, a little bit fearful. Thoughts are going to start racing. They're going to wake up between 2 and 4 in the morning and find it difficult to get back to sleep. Just typical things. They might have constipation, dry skin disorders, things like this, feeling spaced out and ungrounded. These are really typical symptoms for any Vata type that's moving out of balance. And there are protocols they can apply to come back into balance. For Pitta types, they'll start to feel irritable. They'll start to think. So it's really interesting, actually, in a work situation. I've got a team of people. The Vata types will be getting anxious and they'll be thinking in that team of people when things are going a bit wrong. They'd be thinking, what did I do wrong? They'd get anxious about it. The pitta types would be getting angry about it. And irritable would be thinking, what did you do wrong? And that's how they'll behave in a group team situation. They'll have problems with too much heat in their body. So they could be prone to diarrhea or loose stools. They can have skin eruptions, and they'll become progressively more and more irritable with everybody and everything. And then the kapha types, they'll just start to feel flat. They'll just start to lose their energy and motivation. They'll want to sleep all the time. They'll feel heavy. And if they don't come back into balance, they become very flat, very depressed, and find it difficult to get out of bed in the morning. So as soon as anybody notices, like if you have an Ayurvedic consultation, you already know what your constitution is, so you know what's likely to go out of balance, and you start to see it, and then you apply the remedy. So I'm very Vata. I've got a lot of Vata in my constitution, so I will notice if I'm too busy and I'm racing around. I will notice if Vata starts to go out of balance, and I would start to feel slightly spaced out, racing thoughts. So I immediately apply remedies for that. I'll slow down. I'll have oily massages. I'll take a bath with Epsom salts. I'll go to bed early. I'll eat really nourishing stews and things, and I'll do everything I need to do to bring that back into balance.
What would be your advice? Who wants to be so successful, but they gave up at certain point, entering into the stress, or feeling low, or breaking their heart?
Yeah.
What would be your advice for them?
I could do it with 3 simple steps.
All right.
First of all, have an Ayurvedic consultation. Find out what your constitution is. Find out what's currently out of balance and what you need to do to bring that back into balance. First thing. Second thing, live in balance with your circadian rhythms. Get up with the sun, go to bed, be asleep by 10 o'clock. Eat your main meal at lunchtime. Those really simple things. And then the third thing would be to start introducing non-sleep deep rest, whether it's yoga nidra or hypnotherapy, or whether it's an NSDR script, every single day. I'll bring those 3 things together. And if they're really stressed, work with somebody who's going to work with a personal trainer who works, like myself,
Yeah.
who works with those, because if you're really stressed and you're really low, the hardest thing to do is the thing that you need to do, however simple that thing is. And you almost need somebody alongside you saying, you can do it. And also, we have habits that pull us in a different direction. You have to recreate new habits. So sometimes you need support with that. You can do it for yourself. It's hard if you're out of balance and you're very stressed. So it's those 3 things, I'd say. Find out what your Ayurvedic constitution is, what's out of balance, and what remedies you need to apply to come back into balance. 2, understand how to live in balance with your circadian rhythms. And 3, understand how to lower stress levels, get good sleep, and using NSDR, some form of NSDR. Those 3 things, that's why I weave those together. Those 3 things have worked with every single person I work with. Somebody come to see me not so long ago. It's a guy, and he's really, really successful. He started off as a builder, actually, when he was in his younger years. He was about 50 when he came to see me. And he built himself up, and he had a property development business, and he'd done very, very, very well. And he came to me, and first of all, he sat there and he showed me pictures of his beautiful wife and his son, who was at primary school, and a particular, it was a house actually, but an amazing house that he was working on at that time. And then he told me that he woke up every morning in tears. He was so stressed. His life was so stressful. So on the surface, he had this incredible life. He was waking up every day in tears every morning and didn't think he could carry on.
So sad.
Heartbreaking. I think it was 13 weeks later, he said, I don't need to come in anymore. And all we did actually for that, we worked with solution-focused hypnotherapy, a little bit of Ayurveda, but a solution-focused hypnotherapy is actually what helped him come back to a place of balance within himself, to the point where 13 weeks later he said, I don't need to come anymore. And when he came, he was going to get divorced. He was going to finish his business. He was in partnership with somebody. He said, I can't work with this person. So everything was unravelling for him. And this was about a year ago. And he got back in touch recently to let me know that he was married, his son was doing well, his marriage was doing well, his business was doing well. I can give lots of examples of people, so that was somebody who was quite high powered. But you know, I ran a donation clinic, and I wanted to work with people who don't have the money to come to receive this sort of work. And I remember somebody who came, they suffered from deep, deep depression. They'd lost their relationships, they'd lost their work. They were an entrepreneur, small business, this is a small business, but they'd lost that, and they'd been on their sofa for about 2 years with taking antidepressants to help them stay alive, as it were, but not living a life, literally on their sofa. And that was about 16 weeks. In 16 weeks, they were off their sofa, they were reconnected to their family. And it's quite a few years now, but I often see them on Instagram. They set up their business. They have, for their business was in the music industry. It's a small thing, but they're doing really, really, really well. And that all came again. That again was a mixture of the Ayurveda and the solution focused therapy. You know, so it's just that we think everything is so complicated, and it's not. Actually, it's quite simple. We just need to come back into balance.
What's your book?
My book.
Yeah, it's us A Peaceful Belly.
Yeah, so Your Peaceful Belly. That was a self-published one, when we had the COVID lockdowns, and I thought I'm going to write. So that's when I was doing my donation clinic. I thought I'm going to write a little book to give to people, but it just turned into a bigger book. Your Peaceful Belly. It's based around my own journey with Ayurveda, healing all the digestive issues. So I was having a gap year. So my kids had left home. I've got 2 sons, and they'd left home, and I went off for a gap year, and I was on 3 different projects, and this is when I healed all the digestive issues. So I was intolerant to nearly every food I ate. My stomach would blow up, my immune system was really low. I'd been going deaf since my 30s, which from an Ayurvedic perspective is a big conversation. That can be explained through the imbalance, through the trauma. I lost nearly all my teeth, you know, because my immune system was so low. So anyway, but here I was away on these 3 months, feeding myself with Ayurveda while I was on the gap year. And at the end of that 3 months, I was coming back. I was walking a Camino. I was over in Spain in the Pyrenees on a project. And I was walking the Camino, which is a route across the north of Spain, before flying back to England. And I had to eat whatever I came across, and so I did. No problem. I was completely healed, and my nervous system was completely regulated. So Your Peaceful Belly was me explaining about that journey and how it had healed me. So there's a chapter on, there's a little bit about me, but there's a chapter on digestion, and there's a chapter on the Ayurvedic view of digestion as well as the Western approach to healing digestion. And then I just talk through, it gives you a summary of Ayurveda and why it works. Tons of references in it, actually. I wrote it thinking, well, I'm going to have to do all the research and have all the sort of academic references. So that book is a bit of a tomb, and it takes you through everything you need to know to be able to apply Ayurveda to your life. And it explains why it works with all the references. But I've written a second book for Summersdale, and you can pre-order it now. And it's published in October, and it's called The Little Book of Ayurveda. And that's a really accessible read, actually. It's like a little dip into Ayurveda, but it really does explain the thing about the different constitutions and how to understand what your constitution is. There's a quiz in there to help you get a gauge of that. But more importantly, how to recognise when any of the doshas that make up your constitution are moving out of balance and what remedies to apply. It's really simple, that book. And the other book's great. I mean, it's self-published. It's a brilliant book. But it's just for somebody who wants a longer read, who wants, it gives you more depth, it covers more.
As you experience life from these many days, what is actually life is?
What do I think life is?
Well, what do you think life is? As you experience from long way, from the 60 years of your life.
Yeah.
You know, what do you think about life?
Well, of course, I suppose the answer to that question is changes all the time, doesn't it? Because as we grow and evolve, it changes all the time. And you never know. I remember in my 30s realising you never know what you don't know. Yeah. And the brain is a pattern matching thing, isn't it? And so the way we bring ourselves determines what our experience of life is and what we think life is, I suppose. And so there's no one truth on that, is there? You know, and so in my 40s, I became a Buddhist. So I've been a Buddhist for 17, nearly 18 years. And when you work with Buddhist practices, I'm a Tibetan Buddhist. So I have a teacher, I'm a student within a particular tradition. And so for 18 years, I've had different practices. And so a lot of people in the West think that Buddhism is just about meditation and being compassionate, or mindfulness and being compassionate, but it's so much more than that. It's a training for the mind, and it impacts what you think life is. So now, how I think of life is, I think it's a treasure, absolute precious treasure, and it's an opportunity to learn that we're more than our culture is training us to be. We are body, mind and heart. And the heart bit has got left out a bit in Western culture. And I can explain this from an Ayurvedic perspective, actually. In Ayurveda, we talk about how, because it has an energetic underpinning, it talks about how energy becomes life. And we talk about the gunas. The three main gunas are sattva, rajas and tamas. And rajas allows light and harmony and intelligence and creativity to exist. And rajas allows movement to exist and ambition. And tamas allows structure to exist. We need all of these expressions of energy for life as we know it, as a human being in a material world. And we need all of these different forms of energy, if you like, for the human body to exist. But in the mind, we want mostly sattva, because these aren't separate things. This is energy playing out. So sattva can become rajas, can become tamas. It's like a dance that's playing out the whole time. And within our lives and within our bodies, it's determined by the qualities that we feed ourselves through our food and through our senses. It's absolutely fascinating. I'm just here, I'm very young in my learning of this. It's absolutely fascinating, because if you look back at the Industrial Revolution, which is a foundation really of where we are now in Western culture, with consumerism and everything falling apart, really. The Industrial Revolution was very rajasic. It was very much about drive and getting things. It was also very tamasic. People were being taken from the countryside. Nature is very sattvic. Taking them and put into cities, into factories. These were really rajasic, tamasic places. So we started to create a culture that was very rajasic and tamasic that we live in, which means we're feeding ourselves through our senses. Rajas, the qualities of rajas and tamas all the time. And when you have a lot of rajas in the mind, it becomes very driven. And if you carry on feeding those qualities to yourself, that driven quality becomes very destructive. And what you get is decay. Rajas will always become tamas, it will become decaying within the mind. I don't know if this makes sense, but if you look out at the world, you can just see it. You see nature gets built upon, and then we have cities, and we have drive, and we have consumerism. And what's happening in the world? We've got misperception, we've got darkness, we've got confusion, we've got mental instability, we've got destruction of the person and of the world and of the natural environment. This is just a natural progression of too much rajas and sattva and not enough too much rajas and tamas and not enough sattva. And the way we could deal with it individually is to take responsibility for what we're feeding our own minds. And we need to start choosing to live a more sattvic lifestyle. That doesn't mean we can't achieve. So like within the corporate setting, for instance, within the business world, we think we've got to be that rajasic pisser person that's driving. But what people are realising, in the 80s, I'm old enough to know what it's like in the 80s, it was work hard, play hard. And, that's what all these sort of corporations and our financial districts, in my view, they're all built on that. But what we're seeing now in 2025 is how that's destroying everything. It's destroying people, it's destroying organisations, it's destroying countries. And we're scrabbling to try and work out what to do about it. And so I'm working now with an organisation called Whole People, the Whole People Group, and they're going into organisations that are losing money because of the problem with burnout and mental health issues with their staff. And they're helping to turn those organisations around by addressing this. And what they're addressing is this burnout mentality. And this is where Back to Balance comes in. It's like, yes, you can still have that peak performance, but come back to balance. Don't just keep pushing out. And this is the Rajas. The Rajas keeps pushing out. the sattva comes back to balance. It's a hard concept for Westerners to get their mind around. And I know it needs probably a bigger conversation than the one I'm having here. But there are simple things that we can do. Because what we consume determines the state of our mind. So if we are, watching the soap operas, going to bed after 10 o'clock, getting up late, watching all the dramas, listening to 24/7 news, going to work, working hard, then playing hard, we're consuming rajas all the time through our senses. And there will come a point when there's going to be mental instability and decay, physically and mentally and emotionally. If we don't want that to happen, we've got to consume the light, the more balanced, the more harmonious, the light qualities, the sattvic qualities. And we can individually choose to do that. And we can create systems within the world that recognises the need for that. And the consumer culture, the burnout culture, doesn't recognise that need, doesn't understand that. It's a big, it's a lot there, isn't there? Yeah, needs unpicking really.
On the other day, I asked one of my friend, like he's not my friend, like an elder man, asked that I just want to give up on this podcast. I don't want to do anymore this podcast because it's really tough to find the guest who can talk in a specific and spectacular manner. So I just want to give up on this podcast, and I just want to be in a private life.
Yeah.
So
This is what somebody you were talking to said.
Yeah. I'm talking to them. So they said, like, they send me a message, but what would be your advice? Who wants to give up on their life?
Somebody who wants to what life?
Who wants to give up on their life?
Give up on life. Oh, give up in life. Okay, let me see if I understand this properly. Give up on life because they just want to step out of the rat race and go buy some land and grow some food, or give up on life feeling suicidal. Which one are we talking about?
So it's not suicidal.
So
it's not like suicide.
Not like suicide. They just want to step out of the rat race.
Yeah, just want to like enter into the another field rather than this field. Yeah. So just want to give up on this field because it's like tough anyways. So they want to avoid this anyway.
Yeah, well, it would be the same thing again, really. It would be, if you're able to, take some time to come back into balance. It's always the same. It's the same thing every time. You would need to take time to come back into balance. Because you see, if you're feeling too stressed, or you're feeling burnt out, or if life's feeling overwhelming, I think that's what you were talking about, then if you're able to, do less. Because if you can, the body and the mind are so incredibly regenerative. So say you have a passion for doing podcasts and you're really loving doing it, but then pressures are building up and you're thinking, oh, I can't do that anymore. That's just your mind and your body telling you just need to stop for a while and come back to balance. When you've got the balance back, the passion for doing what you love will come back.
You know what? When I talked with him, he sent me a message. He sent me a text. You know what he sent me? I don't care who is doing better than me. Because the truth is, I'm not in competition with anyone.
Lovely.
Yeah. The only person I need to be better than is the person I was yesterday.
The person I was?
Yesterday.
Lovely. Yeah. That's beautiful.
Last year, I was different. I have grown, improved, and learned a lot. That's what really matters.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's me versus me. So every day I woke up and ready to push myself further, to challenge my limits and become a best version of myself.
Yeah.
I don't let other people's success make me feel small.
Fantastic.
Their journey is theirs, mine is mine.
Yeah.
So he said it perfectly.
That's so wise, isn't it?
Yeah.
So wise.
It's so wise. So yeah, that's what he said. And at that certain point, I just thought about it. It doesn't matter if you come up with any things, or like, do you have any stress, any burnout, any things in your brain, just take out all of these, because you want to do it. You want it anyways. Nobody wants it. Nobody want to do it in your place. So you have to do it. You have to step forward about it. So it's your life. It's your journey.
Yeah.
You have to write your own book in your journey.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you have to be your own author.
Yeah,
Anyways.
yeah, that's so empowering, isn't it?
Yeah. That's
So,
so.
do you know, coming over here on the train, I was thinking about the world and all the big things going in the world, and how people can feel disempowered.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I think the way the world changed is because I saw one of my sons last night, and he was saying a lot of people in his generation are feeling, I don't want to work hard. You know, we're talking the world's complete chaos, and we all think that we're being told there's going to be World War III by 2030. Why would I want to work my socks off for anything? You know, and here we were having a chat about this, and it was the feeling of how the world is causing people, particularly, you know, millennials and the Generation Zers, I think, particularly, that there's no hope. And they're looking at governments and they're looking at countries and they're thinking, we haven't got a hope in hell. That's what they're feeling. So I was thinking about this on the way over here and the disempowerment of that. And I was thinking, the way the world changes, I think, is through ordinary people doing ordinary things.
Exactly.
Which is exactly what you've just said.
Ordinary
People just doing ordinary things. We can come back into balance so that we bring the best of ourselves to do those ordinary things. And if everybody's doing those ordinary things, one of which is being kind, really, I think, you know, all job done. The world changes, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
Nothing could be more important than, particularly for your generation, to feel empowered. So I absolutely love what you've just read.